And welcome back to Meeting of the Minds. Today I'm here with the great Fred Diamond. He is the co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales. He is the host and the producer of the Sales Game Changers podcast and webcast. Fred, welcome to the Meeting of the Minds.
Gene, it's great to be here with you, my friend. I'm very, very excited.
Excellent. We speak a lot about mindset here. We usually do it in the context of sports, weight loss, fitness, but we're real excited to have you as a sales expert, business extraordinaire, and we'd love to hear your take on how mindset relates to success in sales.
You know, it's interesting. We're doing this interview at the end of June 2020. So I run what's called the Institute for Excellence in Sales. I'm based here in Northern Virginia, not too far from Washington, D.C. And our mission is to help sales leaders acquire, retain, motivate, and elevate top-tier sales talent. So prior to the pandemic kicking in, we were doing 50 live events per year. We did one on mindset, and it was going to be in October of this year. Well, when the pandemic kicked in, we started doing a weekly webcast called Optimal Sales Mindset. So we talk about mindset, ideas, thoughts, strategies, way you can keep your mindset clear, because what happens between the ears is the most important thing in sales. And having the optimal sales mindset is just critical all the time, even more so right now with all the distractions and news, and every day there's something new and good news, bad news. You know, you really just need to keep your mindset as focused as possible.
Love it. Makes a lot of sense. And as competitive as sports are, I'd have to assume that sales and business, you're dealing with even much more fierce competitors because the stakes are higher, the dollar's on the line, it's people's livelihood. Kind of really makes sports kind of look like a joke when you think about it, but with the stakes that are riding on sales. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, nothing happens until something gets sold. So every company that's out there, it's the sales organization that's supporting the accountant, you know, the marketing organization, everybody in finance, you know, everybody in HR, you know, if things don't get sold. I'll give you an example. So on my Sales Game Changers podcast, we interview sales VPs, sales leaders around the globe about their career journey, and we get some tips on how you can take your sales career to the next level. I interviewed a guy named Gary Newgard. Gary's been with companies like Compaq and Sun and Oracle. He's now the VP of public sector for a company called Pure Storage, which is a data storage company. And he sells into the federal government. We call the federal government Fortune 1. It's the biggest market on the planet. He said selling into the federal government is the NFL of sales. You know, he said, you win or you lose. You know, he said everything is critical, you know, because we're supporting such an important mission. He said, but you're out there on the gridiron. You know, there's competition, there's price wars, there's value, there's politics. There's things that are thrown at you at the last minute, regulations, laws, if you will. But to use your analogy before, man, it's really where, if you look at a football field, it's the same exact thing. And the top sales professionals use mindset strategies of the great athletes. You know, when we do our webcast and our podcast, we hear it all the time. You know, we hear sports analogies all the time. People use the analogy like the Wayne Gretzky, you know, I skate to where the puck is going to be, you know, and the Michael Jordan, you know, I never made a shot that I didn't take, you know, those types of things. So a lot of it is the mentality of some of the top performing athletes out there.
Absolutely. How did you get your career started? What got you into sales, into business, and then eventually led to the podcast?
Yeah, so I spent the early part of my career with companies like Apple Computer and companies like that. And most of my career in the beginning was in marketing. And one thing I noticed was that the sales professionals were the ones that were making it happen. You know, those were the ones that were in the game. You know, those were the ones that were making things happen with the customer. And I realized early on in my career that my job was to support these salespeople, even though I was in corporate marketing. And that's always been my mentality as a marketing professional. Most people were hiring me. I shifted into consulting at one point in the early 2000s, and I was an outsourced chief marketing officer. But most people were hiring me because they had sales challenges or revenue generation challenges. And even though they needed marketing to be more effective, it was to drive sales, to help the salespeople be successful. So we created what's called the Institute for Excellence in Sales. And we created that for me to meet more salespeople, to be honest with you, really more sales leaders who might hire me as a consultant. Along the way, we came up with the idea for the podcast. I did some DJing after college, weddings, bar mitzvahs, the whole thing. I was a podcast listener. I would listen nonstop to Tim Ferriss and John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn and a couple fun ones as well. And I said, I could easily do that. So took a quick course, started doing my podcast. I was not afraid of the mic. A lot of podcasters are afraid of the mic. And I wasn't afraid to get people's stories out there. So my niche was to interview sales VPs. A lot of people who are in the sales world, like the consulting, training, author world, were doing their own shows from their own perspective. Mine wasn't that. Mine was, let's get these great stories from some of these sales leaders out there. And, they very rarely had the opportunity to tell their story. They rarely had the opportunity to talk about a mentor, about their first sales job, about their greatest lesson, about their tips for people who were them 20 years, into the future. So it just became a lot of fun. People wanted to be on the show. I did every show face to face. I traveled to New York City. I traveled to North Carolina, to Tennessee, to Philadelphia to interview people, and of course all over DC where I'm based. And when the pandemic kicked in, of course, we shifted everything to online, like you and I are doing right now over Skype. And it's just been such an honor and a pleasure to be able to tell the stories. And one of the great things has been a lot of young sales professionals reaching out to me via LinkedIn. Gee, I loved your interview with Paul McConville. Can I reach out to him? I'm like, yeah. He gave you his LinkedIn address. Go LinkedIn and start the conversation. I've heard so many people who said, I've interviewed sales executives who listen to my show. And, that's part of our mission. Help sales leaders acquire, retain, motivate, and elevate top tier talent.
That's great. And you kind of answered my next question already, or a little bit, or alluded to it anyway. I was going to say, what's your mental edge? What separates you from other people? What are some of your driving life philosophies? And one of the things you just said was when you listened to the podcast, you said, hey, I could do that. Whereas a lot of people might look at the same thing and say, wow, look at Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, all these celebrities, these rich, these famous people. I could never do that. But you looked at it differently. You said, I could do that. Talk about that, your mindset a little bit.
Absolutely. So there's three things that I'll talk about. One is I really believe you just need to get started. There's a Chinese proverb. Well, actually, a better example is, they say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is today. So I really believe that you could start anything tomorrow. Now, I took a course. I took the guy who I follow is a guy named John Lee Dumas. He had a show called Entrepreneurs on Fire. High energy guy. He did a show a day interviewing an entrepreneur. I took his free course, which was basically an advertisement for his $1,000 course. I took that course. I studied it. I bought his equipment. And you know what? I just started interviewing people. And I listened to the first show I ever did today because I'm bringing that guest back on one of our webcasts. And you know what? I sounded like a teenager. I was like talking very fast, and I was like, using like and those kind of things. And I've refined it a little bit over time, but you just got to get started. And here's the thing. Most people aren't listening for your mistakes. They're listening because they want the content. So if someone's going to give you a minute of their time to listen to a podcast or listen to your webcast, they want the content. They're not going to be there to criticize and say, oh, he said 3 times, and they don't care. If they care, they're going to log off. Most people are listening. They're giving you a minute of your time for that. Second thing is I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. Speaking of podcasts, one of the podcasts I was a big follower of was a guy called Hal Elrod, who wrote a book called The Miracle Morning. Are you familiar with Hal or The Miracle Morning at all?
I've heard about it.
It's great, man. He's written like 10 books now. Miracle Morning for couples, Miracle Morning for teachers, Miracle Morning for teenagers. And basically, he talks about how you get more done from 5 to 7 in the morning than you do any other time during the day. And I think that's one of the main premises of the military as well, that the Army guys get more done before you even wake up. So he basically has 5 principles. It's called savers: silence, a little bit of meditating, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scripting. The S is scripting. So I've been following Miracle Morning. I used to be a late night person. I used to be up at midnight sending emails. And then I began to realize that most of my clients, they were sending me their last email at like noon. So here I am, like always on, my computer's always on, doing emails. I'm like, no one's like replying. So I shifted to the Morning Miracle. I've been doing it for like 5 years. The other thing is this, the third thing to answer your question is I'm not afraid to reach out to people. And that's a huge premise of sales. There's 3 key words that we like to use to make you a successful sales professional. Mindset. So I'm very excited to have met you and your brother. Number 2, we talked about, the courage to just get started. Just get started. Make 50 phone calls. Don't be afraid. If someone says no, who cares? Move on to the next one. It's nothing personal. Move on to the next one. And the third is creativity, especially right now. We're in an unusual time, obviously. Everyone's dealing with this, how they're dealing with this. Everybody was having their best year ever, the beginning of 2020, everybody we know. Then the world changed. And if you're still a sales professional or a business professional, you're still a business professional or a sales professional, right? So what should you be doing today, July 1st or June 30th, whatever today is, to be a professional? You may not be transacting like you expected to, but are you studying your customer's market, right? Are you practicing your sales skills? Are you practicing how to write better emails? Are you listening to shows like you and I are doing right now? What are you doing to be a professional, even though it's not quite exactly what you expected it was going to be?
Right. Really seizing the day, seizing the opportunities, really being ferociously opportunistic, seeing what's available, doing a needs analysis of myself. What can I improve on? What am I doing well? Let's figure out a way to correct the things we're not doing so well. And let's take what we are doing well and let's make it freaky. How do we bring that to the next level? So talk about that a little bit, about the improvement of our weaknesses and also taking our strengths and making them dynamite.
That's a great question. So, we started doing webcasts the moment everybody was told to stay home. And I had a license to go to webinar for years, and for my clients and for the Institute, we did, the occasional webinar, right? Maybe every 2 months, if I remembered, we would do a webinar. So I dusted off my GoToWebinar license and did a quick conversation with a friend or two who do a lot of webinars. And we talked about, just some of the changes to the software. And we started doing shows. So we do a webcast every single day for women in sales, for sales leaders, for young sales professionals, and again, the mindset thing. And, we were talking about things like, what should you be doing? How many calls should you make? How do you stay sane? All those types of things. How do you maximize your performance today? And along the way, Gene, what occurred to me was, if you're a sales professional, you need to be a sales professional right now. Not, a lot of people aren't transacting a lot of business right now. Some markets are doing okay. Most of them aren't. One of our members is in the entertainment space. He sent me an email about a month ago if I knew anybody who needed 2 tons of popcorn, because all of his theaters and arenas were closed. So, not everyone's doing a lot of transaction, but what should you be doing? And I would say there's 3 things you should be doing. If you're serious, if you're a sales professional right now, if you're an NBA player, a Major League Baseball player, a golfer, a tennis player, even though you're not performing in front of crowds, you're probably running, you're probably maintaining your strength training, right? You're doing those things because you're a sports professional. In sales, you need to be doing 3 things. You need to be knowing your customer's marketplace intimately. So you need to provide value to your customer. Now is the time, and it was the time before this as well. You need to be so smart about what your customer is going through right now, what their opportunities are going to be, quote unquote, coming out of the pandemic, right? Because, we're beginning to kind of reopen. People are getting back on a normal schedule. The only way you're going to provide value to your customer is by understanding their opportunities, their challenges. And for every customer you have, it's gotten harder because their customer is possibly struggling. Their customer's customer is struggling, right? So it's this big supply chain. Get to know your customer's market intimately. And the way you do that is by studying. Go to all the trades, keep reading the trades more than ever. Ask people, jump up on LinkedIn groups, those things, ask questions. So when you go back to your customer, you're intimate on the challenge. Second thing is identify 2 or 3 things that you need to improve on and start practicing those. You know, you guys are in the wrestling space, you deal with a lot of athletes. You practice. You practice all the time. Golfers, tennis players are practicing like 5, 6, 7 hours a day, right? A lot of sales professionals, they wing it. Hey, I got the gift of gab, I got charisma, I have a warm smile. Everybody tells me I should be good at sales. Sales is sports, man. So what should you be practicing on? Practicing on right now, practicing on speaking to the dot. And when I say the dot, I'm talking about the camera at the top of at your laptop, right? Everybody's going to stay home, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be home for the next till possibly January. They just announced that Broadway is closed till January. So you're going to be speaking to the dot. You better work on your ability to do that. You better work on your background of your screen. You better work on your attire. You're now selling. The first couple of months, yeah, we all kind of got a pass as we were getting used to it and we were homeschooling and, it's like you played with the background on Zoom. Okay. Those days are kind of gone. Now we're focused on how do you communicate to the dot. Yep. And the third thing I would tell people is communications, written communications. Work on your emails, work on your, crafting smart business cases, because you're going to have to be effectively communicating to people out there.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And with sales, it's like you said, it's just like sports. It's so all encompassing. There's so much you could be doing. You're certainly not at a loss of things you could be doing to improve on a regular basis, even as basic as speaking to the dot. How many times I feel like like you said, I'm speaking to you as I see you, but you're up here. You're not here. You're here.
Yes.
So that becomes very big. And like you said, people had a free pass maybe in the beginning as we were all learning it, but now it's serious business. The people who look the best on the camera, who are able to communicate the best, have the most professional background, all of this, it's all pieces of the puzzle, and it's all dollars and cents at the end of the day. So you're right, it's serious business.
Yeah, I mean, your company, we did an interview on one of our webcasts with a guy named Lee Salt, who wrote a book called Sales Differentiation. And he said that sales is the organization that's going to drive their companies out of this. So, it's going to be the sales organization. Of course, a lot needs to happen macro-wise, if you will, but it's going to be the performance of sales to bring in the revenue. A lot of the companies that have shown profits, during the early stages of the pandemic, figured out their profits by cutting. No one's traveling, so boom, there's a big expense that's gone. Sales commissions are way down, so boom, there's a big expense that's gone. But you can't cut your way to growth. The only way you grow is by expanding, and companies are going to have to be creative and thinking things through and truly understanding, how they're going to be able to find this revenue that they all lost.
Yeah. And what are some of the best resources that you know of, whether it be books, YouTube, I'm sure a lot of the things you do also, but just about the simple and basic self-presentation. Some of us speak too little. Some of us speak too much. Some of us have an Italian background and we're always moving our body. And that could be good at some times, but at other times it might put people off. It might come across as nervous energy. So what are the best resources that you know of for self-presentation?
So, one of the opportunities at the Institute for Excellence in Sales is that we've gotten to know all the great sales trainers, sales speakers, those kinds of things. So at the Institute, we run our Sales Game Changers webcast every day. Every day we're bringing sales leaders, with the exception of Monday. Tuesday, we do a show for women in sales, like I mentioned. Wednesday, we're bringing sales leaders. Thursday, we're talking about mindset. And every Friday, we're bringing on a sales author or speaker. So every single day at noon or 2 o'clock, you can chime in and you could watch and learn from a great sales professional. There's some of the great ones that we've worked with. There's a guy named John Asher. I'm holding up his book. I know we're on audio, but John Asher with Asher Strategies wrote a book called Close Deals Faster. This was an amazing book. We had someone else on our podcast. Her name is Colleen Francis. She wrote a book called Nonstop Sales Boom. If you come to our website, you'll find some of these great speakers. Just Google great sales books. There's thousands of them. Not thousands. There's dozens, I should say. And go to YouTube and search, people like Tom Snyder, who wrote Close, the Price-Driven Sale. Asher, like I said, just wrote some books. Mark Hunter, he's known as the Sales Hunter. He wrote a great book right before the pandemic kicked in called Sales as a Mind Game. He also wrote High Profit Prospecting and High Profit Selling. So become a reader. You're not going to learn a whole lot by watching, quick videos on YouTube. You'll get exposed, but it all comes down to taking this stuff and executing it as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's different ways. I think there's so many different areas where, how do you sound on the phone call? How do you sound on the face-to-face when you're selling? And then it's a little bit different when you're interviewing someone, and it might be a little bit different when you're the one being interviewed. And then, so all of that, each one of those things is kind of a world in and of itself. I mean, I'm sure there's some underlying principles, speaking clearly, building rapport, but each one of those areas has so much you could learn.
So, it's interesting. We talked about sports again, and practice is so critical. I've done 250 Sales Game Changers podcast interviews, and one of the permeating themes that the sales leaders, and these are people who've been in sales for 20, 30, 40 years, I ask them, what's your final thought for the people watching or listening to today's webcast or podcast? One of the permeating thoughts is be a professional. Treat sales as a profession. And again, if you're a professional, you read, you ask questions. One thing we've seen a lot of companies do is hire somebody right now to work with their people on using Zoom or using GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting. If your company hasn't done that, go search someone like Julie Hansen. Julie Hansen's she spoke at the Institute. She's done a whole bunch of videos on speaking to the dot, what to wear, how to be present, your background, those types of things. The other thing I would do is I would practice. You're home, your peers are home. Reach out to your boss's boss. Hey, could we do like a 5-minute Zoom practice? He'd say yes, or she would say yes. Guarantee you, they want you to be successful. Your boss's boss wants you to be successful. Your boss wants you to be successful. And right now, it's critical that you be successful. So every company has the Zoom licenses. Go ask a peer of yours. Hey, let's practice this. Let's 5 o'clock today. When we're quote unquote off the clock. Let's just you give me a 10-minute presentation. I'll give you a 10-minute presentation. Give me feedback, etc. Get groups of 3. Take it on your own. Here's the thing. A lot of times, we're talking about sales training and things like that. A lot of times people are waiting around, right? If you're a great athlete, you're not waiting around for your coach. You did a lot of wrestling. I visualize these guys like running. If you didn't run 5-7 miles a day, right? I have to imagine that's a big part of it. My son was a competitive hockey player, and he played ice hockey all the way through college. And we hired a coach for him when he was getting into his sophomore year. I remember the coach said, every day you're watching TV, you should be doing push-ups as you're watching TV. No, nothing wrong with watching TV, but you should be on the ground doing push-ups or lifting weights. You should be sitting on the couch eating ice cream, as you're watching TV. Same thing in sports. Don't wing it, man. Practice during those hours. Read the books. Listen to the podcast. There are thousands of them out there. I've done 250 episodes. I get young people who reach out to me. It's like, wow, I just listened to your show with Dorian Cass. That was great. I'm like, good for you. That was episode number 40. That was 2 years ago. You spent 30 minutes that you could have been tweeting, or, texting, or, playing, I don't know, what's a big video game right now? I don't really know. I play Words with Friends. That's the only thing I do. Use that time to do those things and, engage in conversations. Ask. For the salespeople out there who want to get better, there are thousands of people who are older than you, a level or two above. Reach out to them now and ask questions.
That's exactly why I had you on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fred. Awesome. How do we send more people your way?
Well, they can just go to, just reach out to me via LinkedIn, Fred Diamond. I'm the most active Fred Diamond on LinkedIn. I post something every day. I got tens of thousands of followers. You can find out about the webcast and the podcast. You can also go to salesgamechangerspodcast.com, salesgamechangerspodcast.com. You can find it on Apple as well.
Excellent. I'm actually going to sneak in one more question because you brought up LinkedIn yet again. What are some of your tips, the best ways to reach out to people, how to come across the most professional, what might jump out at other people, and genuinely creating value for them?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked. I was talking on this on another podcast the other day, and someone said, what's the one advice you would have, closing advice, and I'll use this as a closing advice. If you're in sales and your LinkedIn profile right now in July 1st, 2020 or June 30th, if your LinkedIn profile isn't perfect, then you just blew 3 months, my friends. But there's still time that you can improve it. Think of LinkedIn this way. Think of LinkedIn from your customer's perspective. Okay. It's not about I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. It's about I love working with financial aid providers to help them be more effective with their customers. Or I love helping, or what my mission is to help federal government IT professionals improve the mission of their customer. Think of it in terms of your customer. You're not going to sell. I hate a lot of my friends are big in LinkedIn. We talk all the time. We hate the people who connect and then sell. I block those people right away. I might accept them because they slip through the cracks. Then if the first link is, hey, I offer this lead generation source, boom, goodbye, you're blocked. I don't care who you are blocked because you don't use LinkedIn as a first sell. LinkedIn is two things. It's a marketing platform. So it's a way for you to establish yourself as someone who provides value for your customer or your partner. And secondly, it's an opportunity to take the relationship to the next level. We have an expression that, LinkedIn, then a phone call. So, I've done so many great Zoom calls and Skype calls over the last 3 months with people that I've known via LinkedIn for, anywhere from up to 5 to 10 years. One Zoom call, one virtual call will take your relationship miles ahead of where it is. So use LinkedIn as an opportunity to engage in a conversation. If you go right for the sale, your customer will hate your guts. They're going to block you, and you're not going to be successful because, just because they connected, that's still 0% in the pipeline. The question now is establish that relationship, show somebody as someone who has value, and that you're providing value to all the people you connect with. But once again, final thought, think of it from your customer's perspective. Who's going to be looking at your profile? Think about how you are being attractive to them.
Fred, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got linked up together, that we've connected and getting to know each other better. Man, this is so much great information you shared with us. I really have to watch this probably another 2 or 3 times, let it all sink in, take some notes. I hope all of our callers do that as well. Institute for Excellence in Sales, the great Fred Diamond. Fred, thank you very much. God bless you and your family.
Thanks, Gene. You too, and to your family as well.